The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
On May 5th, 1993, three 8-year-old boys are reported missing in the West Memphis area of Arkansas. Soon after, a gruesome discovery is made: the bodies of the three boys. However, what transpires after makes this one of the most famous cases of a miscarriage of justice in the history of America. Or did they get it right? You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of the West Memphis Three.
In 1993, the savage murder of 3 children shakes the small town of West Memphis, Arkansas. The following year, 3 teenagers are convicted for these horrific crimes, sending shockwaves throughout the country. The young men maintain their innocence, and 20 years later are released from prison on a plea deal. In these exclusive interviews...
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia.
You got to hit pause on that, brother. It was still going when you trying to start talking.
I know. I was not very smart when it comes to some of that savvy stuff.
Very professional.
I do my best, I do my best. All right, so total disclosure here.
What's funny is I was talking to somebody and they were like, what's funny is when Arlo says something really poignant and you're like, I'm sorry, what? I wasn't listening.
Hey, you got a little bit of flack on the Facebook page about 3-hour episodes.
What did they say?
They were like,
what did he say?
They said, I can't bring it up, but basically somebody was like, yeah, Coach over here's threatening us with a 3-hour episode. 3-hour episode. Coach total time, 47 seconds.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm telling you, my contributions may be small, but they're meaningful. And I may have said that a few times in different contexts in my life.
Just a few. All right, so I wanted full disclosure before.
Go ahead. I'm pissed about something, so I want to tell you about it. But you go ahead.
Well, I'm kind of pissed about this. All right, so Facebook hits me up. I guess this new Facebook AI bullshit was like, hey, you can have an ad run. And I'm like, okay. And so I just selected the defaults. Well, no, I just selected yes. $75 for like 6 hours for this damn ad to run. And it had checked if people clicked on it, that it sent a message, a private message, Facebook Messenger message. So we start getting all these damn messages, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And all of them are like...
so that's what that was.
Yeah, and so all of them are like, mistake, sorry, that one guy I sent you. I was like, look, buddy, nobody contacted you.
Yeah, what the hell you bothering me in my front porch and I'm trying to swat flies?
Hell, you're the one that clicked on it. So anyway, so that was a total snafu.
I'm just learning this now because I was certainly confused. We were getting all kinds of messages. I was like, what? I thought we was being like doxxed or something,
Well, I did too until I went back and I'm like, the only thing that's different is I ran that ad, and why the hell? So I go back and you can pause the ad, and when you pause the ad, you can go back through the settings, and there it was, and I was like, delete. So anyway,
well, at least we got some, people seeing it.
Any feedback is good feedback.
We got like on our public page, not our private page, the group page, on our public page, we got like 40 comments on JonBenet Ramsey.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that
by far the most we've ever gotten.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that for just a second. There was a lot of comments on there, and we just, we don't play the troll game. We let sleeping dogs lie, but I couldn't help it.
Yeah, you got a little salty.
My whole thing,
I seen.
My whole thing was, they were like, leave this girl alone. Let her rest in peace. This has been solved. And I'm like, no, and no. And so I couldn't help it. And so I put on there, basically, if this was your daughter, would you want it just to become extra cold? And I elaborated because her daddy had sent out a public plea in that documentary I referenced in the original episode. And he even was sitting on stage at like a call to action at CrimeCon in 2022, trying to put pressure on the Colorado governor to do DNA testing on those 65 items. So no, it's not like we're over there poking or peeling the scab off of a solved case. This is still an unsolved case. And similar to the one we're going to cover tonight. This is still a unsolved case.
I don't know, man. Is it?
Well, I can tell you who I think did it, and I can tell you who in the Oxygen Network thing that Bob Ruff did, who the former FBI profiler said did it.
I've got a very strong opinion myself.
Yeah, I mean,
but let's not let these cats out of the bag.
So what you ill about?
What I'm ill about? I'm ill about the fact that like 2 days ago, my school sends me an email. Well, they send it to everybody. And it's graduation requirements.
This late?
Yeah. Every staff member is required to attend graduation and march in their regalia. So I have to wear a cap and gown. I knew that was coming. I knew that already because I had to get measured for it at the beginning of the year, which they still haven't given it to me. So I don't know where that cap and gown is. But they were like, you must attend. I don't like must. Like, required. I don't like those things. Anyway. But then they were like,
highly encouraged.
You must wear a white long sleeve button up shirt, black pants, dress shoes, and a tie of your choice.
Oh, and we went through this when we worked together. I went through it for 18 years. Under a hot ass graduation gown. There ain't nobody gonna see near a thing except 3 inches of your slacks and your shoes.
Correct. If they would have said dress shoes required, okay, wear what you want, but dress shoes required, I get that. You see my feet. But no, if anybody knows me, I am a khaki short hoodie guy. Blue jeans and stuff. I don't get fancy a lot.
He ain't fancy like Applebee's.
I have 3-button dress shirts that I like if I have to get fancy. I have regular khaki pants if I have to get super fancy.
That's his Red Lobster outfit.
Yeah, exactly. That's my that's my Easter Sunday Red Lobster
that's
outfit.
Right. Like, that's where your granny's gonna pinch your cheeks for coming into Red Lobster with you.
So I had to go today and buy all of that stuff for my outfit to wear under an outfit. $165 later.
Dude, you should have went to Goodwill.
Huh?
You should have went to Goodwill.
Well,
your town is in shambles, but you should have went to Goodwill.
Yeah, from the worst storm in this town's history, I had to go buy shit. Only reason why I had time to do it is because I was out of work today because the town was fucking destroyed.
Yeah, there you go.
But luckily, Kohl's was open.
Thank God for Kohl's. It's like the Belks of our generation.
Belks in the mall, and I'm not going to the mall because it's sad.
It is sad,
it's
man.
Sad.
It's sad. Well, ours is sad. It's like we got the anchor stores, if you even call them that. We just have a Belks and a sporting goods store that looks like a Kmart inside. That sporting goods store looks like a Kmart.
You know what they did to mine? The poor mall is when some of the anchor stores closed, they just walled them up So like we know that used to be Sears. You can still see it outside. You just can't get to it inside. Like,
yep. You're right. They did the same thing here. All right. So,
but no, like kids today just will never understand how cool the fucking mall was on a Friday, about 7:00. You know, in the summertime, your mama just dropped you off. The movie theater was attached. My sister worked there. I got in free for 20 years.
We didn't have a movie theater attached to well, the old mall we did.
Let me tell you, I had many a dates to the movies and then the Steak and Shake to eat because Steak and Shake was open and it was fucking cheap and I got in free to the movies. That was my go-to, brother.
It's his number one plan. Okay, so since you asked about Jean Bonnet, we have had a lot of traction on that one in just over we released that before we took a break. So in 2 weeks that has seen a lot of listens, downloads, whatever you want to call it now. It's almost 700 in just over 2 weeks. So our obscure cryptids got some love. Everybody's like, the squonk, the squonk. And I'm like, I've never heard of it. But anyway.
There's something very endearing about a creature so ugly, it cries itself. So it cries so much, it leaves a trail of tears.
Correct.
I don't really like using trail of tears. I should like a path of sorrow.
Yeah, puddles of salty nastiness. Well, that even sounds worse.
Yeah, sounds kind of bad, bro.
Join us next week on Alliterations Brews as we butcher the English language. Okay, so tonight we are going to do our version.
Probably one of the most famous cases around.
Yes. And when we say famous, most podcasts that tackle this subject or this case are looking at like 3 to 4 parts. Again, if you don't know anything about the West Memphis 3 case, first of all, go out and get yourself a copy of our good friend George Jarrett's book on it. The definitive.
Get on Max and watch the 6.5-hour 3-part documentary called Paradise Lost.
Yep. West of Memphis.
Get on Roku or one of the free TV apps. I think it's Roku. And you can watch the 4th documentary about them made by a different group of people called West of Memphis. There's a lot of material about this case, a lot.
Yes, and it got a little bit more traction when Bob Ruff decided to do a podcast on it. He and Damien Eccles actually became pretty good friends as a result of it. Even I think Jason Baldwin and Bob have become pretty decent friends. I will say this. I watched that Oxygen Network. I think it was a 3-part. It may have been a 5-part. I'm not sure. But you can get, if you have the Oxygen Network, I think it's on demand on their app. It's the Forgotten West Memphis 3. It is done.
That is a good documentary because it focuses. The documentaries I mentioned are focused on the so-called perpetrators, the accused perpetrators. That Oxygen one focuses on the 3 victims. That's why it's called the Forgotten West Memphis 3, because in many ways, that's 100% accurate.
It is, and it's so sad that's what's happened. We're talking about the case that began around May the 5th, 1993 in the little neighborhood just outside of West Memphis called the Robin Hood Hills. And like I said, we are not going to go into this case bullet point by bullet point, give you the backstory on all the characters. It's been done, okay? We're not reinventing the wheel.
It's kind of the same thing we did with Moore Murray, which we got some negative feedback from, and what we did with Jean-Benet Ramsey, which we got a lot of positive feedback from.
Yes, we're just having a discussion about this case, basically. We're going to hit you with some of the key facts, but we're not reinventing the wheel. Yeah,
we're going into this thinking that you have already at least a little bit of knowledge about this case.
And if you don't, by all means, pause this, watch a couple of those documentaries, and then come back, and you too can have a more pleasant experience. I will say, sidebar, with our recommendation about Rebecca Gould's CW documentary episode, true crime episode, even my brother had not listened to our Rebecca Gould episode, and he watched that first. Then he listened, and he was like, man, I could see it. That's what made it so cool. He said, I had the mind's eye visuals after watching before I listened. And he said it was really good. I was like, yeah, that one's the one that kind of put us on the map. So, but anyway, all right. So sidebar over. So we're talking about West Memphis 3. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to start this off with basically Bob Ruff's theory that he came up with on that documentary, The Forgotten West Memphis 3. So again, all the credit's due to him. He does a great job. He's a hell of a man. He has gotten, I feel like his call to arms at the end of this documentary is what we will close with, but he also has really done some great things with his true crime podcast. So on May the 5th, 1993 at about 2:55 p.m., Branch was...
Oh, you can't just say Branch.
I know.
You gotta tell the names, bro.
I know. I screwed up as I said it, man.
Who's Branch?
I'm trying to get back to my notes now. You done screwed it up.
Okay, the three victims were Stephen Edward Branch, Christopher Mark Byers, and James Michael Moore. They were all 8 years old. They were all three best friends, and they were classmates.
Yes. Sorry. I was like having
You're
good. Brain fart moment. Okay. So Stevie Branch is who we are talking about here. Now, so Stevie gets home and his mother, Pamela Hicks, is there. So when he gets home from school, basically, and I'm trying to make sure I don't screw this up, Michael Moore comes over and is they're like thicker than thieves. So, you know, where you see one, you see the other. So immediately he's there and they are riding their bikes around their neighborhood. This is a common occurrence. They ride their bikes everywhere. You know, they play behind people's houses. They're the boys of the neighborhood. So when Michael Moore shows up, he says, can Stevie go ride with me? As basically they're just riding off. Hey, Mom, I'm going to go with him. And we all did it. You know, those of you that grew up in the 90s. So as they're riding.
I used to leave my house as soon as I got home from school, and I'd be gone until my mom would make me come home. And the way my mom would make me come home is this woman could whistle louder than I've ever heard anyone in my life whistle. And everyone in the neighborhood knew that when my mom was whistling, it was probably time for everybody to go home.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'd be like half a mile away maybe, and you'd still hear it. Be like, damn. And if you heard it 3 times,
you better.
She didn't see you. You weren't visible.
Yeah.
By the 3rd time, you was in trouble.
So basically, Michael Moore says, not that Michael Moore, but little Michael Moore, says, hey, can Stevie go ride with me? Pam says to her son, Stevie, boy, you better be home by 4:45. I'm getting ready and I got to go to work. So little Michael says, we'll be back, I promise. Okay. And so that's around, like I said, that's around 2:55. So at about 3:40, they are seen riding their bikes around the neighborhood. Okay. So what we don't know is where Christopher Byers is between 3 and 3:30. Now, during this Oxygen Network thing that Bob Ruff did, he has a phone interview with a man named Bobby Posey. And in this phone interview, Posey said that basically Chris had stopped by his house around 3:30 and told him that his dad had whipped him and he was running away. Keep that in mind, because that is a key point in any of the podcasts you listen to about this case and any of the documentaries you listen to.
It might
now
come up later.
Right. Now, please also keep in mind, we're not throwing shade for a young man being disciplined, okay? And if I remember correctly, and like I said, we're not doing a whole fucking dive into this because True Crime Garage did 3 or 4 episodes on it.
Oh, no. I'm glad you said that because I wanted to bring it up before we started. This is like the 5th time these motherfuckers have done this to us. 2 days ago, which is May 9th today, so 2 days ago.
Did they release
on May 7th, they released a West Memphis 3 episode.
Well, that's probably because of what we'll get to at the end of our episode. That's why we're doing it, so.
What the fuck?
Hey, there's been several.
Like the 5th time we've like recorded something, and it's like, or we were about to record something and we're about to put it out, and then all of a sudden, the most popular true crime podcast out there puts the same fucking episode out.
Well, I will say this: the guys at Necronomipod have kind of hit us. We've kind of crossed paths on a couple of episodes, but they did. What's funny is their episode is totally different from our episode, and we both used facts with both of our episodes. So far with Necronomipod, it's been 2 totally different things. But yeah, it's happened with them before too. So,
I mean, I guess it's bound to happen.
Sometime, and one night it did.
Yeah. I guess it's bound to happen in this line of work, but not as often as it's happened with True Crime Garage. It's to the point where I think they keep up with us.
I think they bug our stuff.
I think they're secretly fans, bro.
Yeah, I think they're fangirling right now. But anyway, okay, so what I wanted to say was, keep in mind it's 1993. And if I remember correctly, Christopher got home, and y'all, I'm sure our lovely fans will correct me, but I think Christopher got home, and he's riding his skateboard, and I think he's riding it down the road on his belly, and his daddy comes by, had already told him not to do it, and his dad had gone somewhere. That may have been when he took his mom to work, or took Chris's mom to work. Anyway, he comes back and catches his ass doing it again, so he tans that hide. I'm not throwing shade on discipline your kid, okay? That's not what we're talking about. And every kid's been that way. Hell, mine, when I busted that ass when he was about 5, was going to go live with my mom and daddy, and I explained to him real quick, those old people that you go over there and have a hell of a time with, that's not the same people that you're going to live with. So as kids, we've all been there. Okay. So again, I don't want this to be a hang up for a lot of people. Oh, his daddy whipped him and he told somebody he's running away. So there's case off. No, this is just how we said it a million times. When it comes to certain cases, everything is under the microscope when shit goes sideways. All right. So, and I misspoke. He was not, the skateboard is true, but the reason he got his ass beat this time is because Chris had been sent home from his Elementary school, man, that was a hard word to get out. Elementary school for
Yeah, you made me stew.
yeah, for acting up, and when he got home after his stepdad picked him up, John Mark Byers picked him up, he busted that ass for getting in trouble at school. Hell, I've been there too. On both ends. I busted and had it busted.
Yeah, I was about to say, who the hell ain't got their ass busted?
Yeah. And I will say this, in 2006, John Mark Byers did do an interview with a newspaper called the Memphis Flyer, and he said, I spanked him with my belt, with his pants up. I hit him 3 times. So, I mean, it's a different time. He didn't bare ass him.
This John Mike Byers, is it John Mike Byers? What's his name?
Yes.
John
Mark Byers.
Character.
Yes, he is. And what is it? West of Memphis?
Good Lord, he is a character. What
is it? West of Memphis where he acts a fool, like he's drunk?
No, it's Paradise Lost.
Oh, okay.
West of Memphis was done way after. Like it was.
They had already been in prison for a while, hadn't they?
Like literally, Paradise Lost got part of the reason why this case is so famous is because this documentary crew got wind of it and started to produce the first Paradise Lost documentary during the build up to the trials and during the trials and all that. And they got unprecedented access to the actual courtroom. Not really done before.
No, this is the first court TV, if you will.
Yeah. And it's just crazy how much access they got. And I mean, it did a lot of good for. Well, we'll talk about that later. We'll get to it.
Okay, so we're still on the same day. So at about 4:30 p.m., a woman named Narlene Hollingsworth reported seeing 3 boys riding bikes, and she would go on to tell investigators that one of them rode out in front of her car and she almost hit him. Now, Ms. Hollingsworth described the boy as being heavyset with dark hair and wearing green shorts, which is inconsistent with the descriptions of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie. Now, a tip from a listener on the Truth and Justice podcast, of which Bob Ruff produces, and that's his, said that there was a man named George Taylor who told police or people he was with Christopher, Michael, and Stevie that day, and he only rode around the neighborhood with them. So he said, he said that he was the boy that Miss Hollingsworth spotted, and that he had gone to the edge of the creek with the 3 other boys. Now, Bob would track down George. He would do a whole interview. Parts of that interview, you're like, man, he's, that's exactly, it all lines up. And then there's some things that he just can't get right. And the one thing he can't get right is the location of Stevie Branch's house, as well as the pipe bridge that the boys used to cross the creek to go into the Robin Hill Woods, or the Robin Hood Hill Woods.
Yeah, Robin Hood Hill. Man, get this right, bro.
That's too many H's, dog.
We got to do these kids justice, man. All of them. All 6 of them.
Yes, amen. So the first sighting of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie, that they're all together, and the timeline has been established, witnesses corroborated, all that good stuff, is basically between 5:30 and 6 p.m. And one key witness to seeing all 3 of them together is Carlos Seals, and he actually sees them lay their bikes down, head into the woods. Now, based on his statement, Bob Ruff was able to narrow down the window of opportunity for the crime to be committed between 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Now, at 8:30 is when everybody starts searching for the boys. Now, quote, Bob Ruff says, quote, knowing that window of time when the boys were abducted and murdered is critical to the investigation as we move forward, because this is a window of time we need to be looking to see who
does and who does not have an alibi. And he does a great job. He had some key things in that documentary that no one had ever thought about. He gets this window down to 2 hours, and we've always, in any true crime podcast you listen to, you can add or subtract about 30 minutes when you're given a time frame. So it could be as little as an hour and 15 minutes that this all went down. It could be 30 minutes that this all went down, but sometime between 6:30 and 8:30, Christopher, Michael, and Stevie are abducted. They are murdered in the Robin Hood Hills, and their bodies are haphazardly, I guess, hidden in the creek. So again, just rough timeline. You're looking at, I don't know why my shit keeps blinking out.
Man, you might want to go see a doctor about that.
Well, I do have, yeah. I mean, my poopy here, my poopy not here. Okay, so anyway, so around so around 6 p.m., Christopher, Michael, and Stevie are seen riding their bicycles on North 14th Street, heading in the direction of Goodwin. Okay, so around 8 p.m., John Mark Byers telephones the West Memphis police to report his son, Christopher Byers, or stepson, Christopher Byers, missing. 10 minutes later, an officer shows up to interview Mr. Byers, and by 8:30, Mr. Byers reported that he had begun searching the wooded area known as the Robin Hood Hills. At 9 p.m., Michael Moore and Stevie Branch's mothers call and report their children missing. At 9:30, Narlene Hollingsworth says that she sees a young man named Damian Nichols and another boy, both in muddy pants, walking near
Damian Nichols? Damian Eccles.
I'm sorry, Damian Eccles. I can't read. Like, I'm serious. Hey, like, I can't read.
There's a lot of names, man. It's okay.
I can't talk. It's awful. Basically says Damian Eccles and another boy were seen with muddy pants on walking near the Blue Beacon truck stop, which is on the other side of Robin Hood Hills. Sound it out. I can't do it, man. We're just going, it's one of those things now that I have screwed it up so bad, it's stuck. I mean, so that's
quicksand, brother.
It's how it's going to go down. So y'all know what I'm talking about.
Out of it, man. Let's go. Let's focus.
All right. So it is at this time between 9:30 and 10 p.m. that the other camp, as we will call them, says that Damien and the other boy, which we will get to, committed these atrocities. Now, on May the 6th, between 1 and 5 a.m., is when the medical examiner, Dr. Frank Peretti, theorizes that Christopher, Michael, and Stevie were murdered. Which we know, well, not that we know. Let me take that back. We don't know. That is the big unknown. But with Bob Ruff's investigation, that, I think you can move that time period way the fuck up. I mean, it'll be dark, don't get me wrong, but I think shit went down way sooner than that. Now,
well, it's still the evening time. That's going to come up in a little bit.
Yeah. Now, on May the 6th.
That it's definitely the evening. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, on May the 6th, around 6 a.m., Gary Gitchell, who is the chief inspector of the West Memphis Police Department, announces that all three boys are missing and that he will direct the search efforts. Now, around 1:45 p.m., during these search efforts is when one of the detectives discovers a naked body of a boy in a gully off of a creek that separates the neighborhood that the boys lived in and the Robin Hood Hills. Around 4 p.m. By 4 p.m., they have located all the boys. They've located their bicycles. And that's one thing that's kind of odd in this case. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did they find the bikes first, or did they find the body first? I thought they found the bikes.
They found the bikes first,
okay.
Man, for real, for sure.
So they find the bikes. They have been thrown into the creek across that pipe bridge that separates the Robin Hood Hills and the neighborhood. And then as they're walking up through this creek looking for them is when they find the first victim, and then further up they find the other two. And I don't know the order, and I really don't want to get into the gory details of this, because keep in mind, y'all, these are 10, 11-year-old kids, man. And I'm sorry, you're right, they were 8.
All 3 8.
They were 8. I apologize.
Well, you also got to mention, I know we're not getting the gory details, but it's important to mention that for all intents and purposes, these boys appeared to be extremely mutilated.
Correct. And they had been hogtied with their own shoelaces. Actually, that's another sticking point in the trial. And in this case, the shoelaces of one boy, basically they're taking shoelaces from one boy and tying up another boy. And so it's a weird thing. And they do a whole I don't know, maybe in one of those episodes on the Oxygen Network, I think they do maybe half the episode is on how the knots were tied, how they could do it, if you could do it one-handed. It's extremely weird.
Yes, it is.
So Steve Jones on May the 7th, 1993, he's a juvenile detention officer and a lieutenant.
Let me interrupt you. I'm sorry for doing it. But yeah, the way the knots were tied, to me, it seems as if you couldn't have done it alone.
No, and that's the hang up.
How are you going to subdue 3 children like that alone? But
now,
anyway.
we will also get into later, and hell, we're already 30-something minutes in this. This may be a 2 parts. This may be 2 parts.
Nope. We're going to do the 3-hour fucking episode. And I want the person that made that comment to time every time I speak, they will click the stopwatch, unclick it, and then tell me how much fucking time I spent talking.
Oh, this is fucking hilarious. All right. So like I said, May 7th, 1993, Steve Jones, who's a juvenile officer, and Lieutenant Sudbury questioned Damien Eccles about the murders, but take no notes during this interview. And if I'm not mistaken, they go to his trailer park. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah, he lived in a trailer park.
No. The first time they didn't take any notes. Like, they rolled up. He was on probation. So they roll up and check him. And they're like, hey, man, do you know anything about these 3 boys? And he's like, nope. And we'll get into every 18-year-old boy's bravado. But so May the 8th, Detective Bill Durham and investigator Shane Griffith question Damien and Jason Baldwin, who is Damien's friend. Now, this is who was supposedly with Damien when he is allegedly seen with another person with muddy pants the night the boys go missing. I don't think that fucking ever happened. I think that lady's trying to interject herself into the investigation. But anyway, again, Damien and this time Jason tell both detectives that they have never heard of any of the 3 boys. They've never seen any of the 3 boys, and they were not around the neighborhood or the Robin Hood Hills during that time. Now, on May the 10th, Damien, without a lawyer, is interviewed at the police station by Lieutenant Sudbury and Detective Byron Ridge. Byron Ridge. While he is being interviewed, they give him a polygraph. And the detective that gives it to him is Detective Bill Durham, who had questioned him a couple of days earlier. Now, according to Detective Ridge's notes, Durham says, quote, Damien had been untruthful and, according to the polygraph, was involved in the murders, end quote. We all know that you cannot glean that kind of information from a polygraph. It's not going to tell you that he was involved in the murders.
Yeah, all he can tell you is if he was dishonest or not. He can't say, oh, well, since he was dishonest, that means he was involved in the murder. That is horseshit.
Now, and here's where the West Memphis police, it's at this moment when they administer this polygraph, they get a fucking hard on to put Damien away, and they don't give two shits what anybody else says, what any other evidence comes to light. They are getting Damien. Now,
yeah, they definitely have blinders on at this point.
Damien at this time is an 18-year-old kid. I think he's already dropped out of high school. He is into the Wiccan kind of aspect. He's a little bit gothic. He paints his fingernails black. He has a disregard for authority. So he, as an 18-year-old kid, is not doing himself any favors, but he will tell you himself, and has told documentary interviewers and anybody like Dr. Phil and everyone, basically, he was a prick to the detectives because he knew he was nowhere near the area. He was nowhere near the boys, and they, basically they could go pound sand. However,
yeah, let's just say that he basically thought that he could do and say whatever he wanted because he wasn't there. He was like, there's no way they can do anything to me because I wasn't there.
Right.
So I'll do and say whatever the fuck I want.
Right. They can go kiss my ass. And
let's just say he learned a harsh lesson.
Yeah. A very, very harsh lesson. So on May the 12th, after this magic polygraph where they determined that he was involved in the murders, the police actually go to his mother, Pam Eccles, and ask her, hey, where was Damien on the night of? And she tells them, on the night of the murders, Damien was with me in our trailer, talking on the phone to two girls who actually lived across the Mississippi in Memphis. Do you think authorities take the mother's word for it?
No.
So, May 19th, Vicki Hutchinson, a private citizen and volunteer detective conducting her own investigation in the case, travels with Damien and Jesse Miskelly, according to what she later tells police, to an SBAT, which is a gathering of witches. Now, this is in a field north of Marion, Arkansas. Now, she claims that she sees about 10 young people with arms and faces painted black, taking off their clothes, touching each other. Now, this is the first time we bring up Jesse Miskelly. Y'all, how he made it into regular public school back then when we had what? General ed, college prep, AP, and then we had the kids that got out of school at 2 o'clock.
Prep.
Yeah, tech prep. And then we had
tech prep was the kids that hung out at the ag building or the auto shop.
We also had those kids that rode on the short bus and left school at 2:15. So what I'm trying to get at.
Hey, my kids leave at 2:15.
I know. What I'm trying
leave them poor souls alone.
What I'm trying to get at is Jesse Miskelly would have been one of those that leaves at 2:15, or would have been one of those that coach teaches. He had an IQ between 67 and 75. Maybe he's a little higher functioning than what you got.
Yes, he is.
Now, this is so convoluted, but Vicky is Jesse's neighbor. And if I'm not mistaken, Vicky's old. Isn't Vicky like 21 at this time? And she's kind of got the hots for Damien. And she's using Jesse to get or make contact with Damien. Now, she asked Damien to take her home, and they leave Jesse, according to her, they leave Jesse at this witches gathering / orgy. Now, here's the problem with her whole story. Damien doesn't have a car. Was never known to even have a license, much less drive a car. So, according to Vicky, he has driven himself, her, and Jesse Miskelly to this witches gathering, which turns into a witches orgy. And then she's uncomfortable and basically is like, hey, let's dump your stupid friend and me and you'll go do the horizontal hokey pokey.
Ew.
Yeah.
That sounds...
Well, about a week later, police interview Vicky. And she tells police that she's like citizen sleuth and she's been doing all this detective work on her own. And that the evidence that she knows of basically Damien and Jesse were involved in both cult activities and the murder of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie. Now, Aaron Hutchinson, who is Vicky's 8-year-old son, tells police that he and Christopher, Michael, and Stevie had at times seen 5 men in the woods sitting in a circle singing songs to the devil and doing, quote, what men and ladies do, end quote. So that you don't lose sight of the blinders that the West Memphis 3 Police Department put on. You have the parent of an 18-year-old kid tell them 2 weeks prior, there's no way my son could have done this because he was here and I had eyes on him and he was on the phone talking to 2 girls he used to go to school with who now live in Memphis. They don't take that into consideration. However, they ask an 8-year-old boy if he's ever seen Damien or Christopher, Michael, and Stevie. And this 8-year-old boy says, oh, yeah, I used to play with Christopher, Michael, and Stevie, and we would go in those woods, and we saw men doing nasty stuff and singing songs to the devil. And so that's what the police grab. And ladies and gents, that right there is the start of one of the worst satanic panic bullshit investigations this country has ever seen. Now, police give old Vicky a polygraph interview, and magically, they come back and say that she's being truthful. I mean, everything she says is the gospel. So Vicky is not 21. I take that back. Vicky is much older than 21. She's probably late 20s with with an 8-year-old son. She's probably, at the least, she's 24. At the most, she's probably 28. Damien's 18. It's not a stretch, but still. Okay. So on June the 3rd, convinced by the polygraph results that they had obtained, I guess, come up with, fabricated is probably a better word. Police questioned Jesse Miskelly about the murders. They think they are zoned in on Damien and Jesse.
Okay, before you get into the details of the interrogation of Jesse Miskelly, I just want to point out the fact that they are going to interrogate him for 12 straight hours, but they are only going to record 41 minutes of that interrogation. And he does not have a lawyer present. He does not have a parent present. And he is a mentally handicapped child.
Yeah, they said, what was it? They said that he had maybe that's where I got the 10 to 12. He had the mental capacity of about a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old.
I would say that was accurate, would be pretty accurate. He wouldn't be in my class, but he's not going to be in college. He's mildly intellectually disabled. But he is definitely behind his peers. He would not be able to take regular education classes. He would be in some sort of modified classes. And they're going to interview him for 12 fucking hours and record 41 minutes of those.
For all of you that got your blood pressure raised and foaming at the mouth when you watched Making a Murderer, when they interviewed that mentally disabled person and he just wanted to go home and watch WrestleMania.
All he wanted to go home and do is what he wanted to go home and watch WrestleMania. That's all he cared about.
Basically,
poor fucking kid, man.
Yeah, basically the same fucking shit goes down.
Yes.
In June of 1993. So, like I said, police are convinced that by their super duper polygraph results, they have their murderers. Okay, we're talking about Damien. We're talking about his friend Jason Baldwin. We're talking about Jesse Miskelly. So they basically bring Jesse in to question him, like Coach said. This questioning goes on for 12 hours. They tell Jesse there was a $35,000 reward for information leading to convictions in the case. In a polygraph interview, Jesse initially denies participating in either satanic rituals or murders. Detective Durham tells another officer Jesse is, quote, lying his ass off, end quote. After several hours of brutal questioning by both Gitchell and Ridge, Jesse begins to tell the officers exactly what they want to hear. And they are leading his ass because there's a little bit, even in the 40-something minutes that they record, they are leading his ass.
Oh, they lead him and he's
still getting it wrong.
Just the little amount they recorded. There's contradicting statements from Jesse. And then you hear the police, well, no, it couldn't have been during the day. They were at school. And he's like, oh, yeah, it was after school.
And I think even one time he asked, what time do you want me to say it was?
Something like that, yeah. But he goes, well, you said earlier that it was between 7 and 8. And Jesse's like, yeah, you're right. It was between 7 and 8. Like, even when you listen to the little bit they recorded, you could see that they manipulated this kid. It
just fucking pisses me off, to be honest with you. It still pisses me off. And they're both, all of these people, well, Jason.
I said it in the opening, trying to be a little coy. It's like, oh, well, did they get it right? Man, I was going to try to play that off at the end, but no, they didn't fucking get it right.
Yeah, the only thing they got right was they found 3 dead 8-year-olds.
This is one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in the history of America for the victims and the so-called perpetrators, who I would consider victims. I mean, they certainly are victims as well.
Yeah, and the state of Arkansas just keeps fucking doubling down when it comes to this fucking case. And I know there's some of you out there that's like, man, Arlo's not cussed this much in a long time, but I'm going to tell you something. Taking advantage of intellectually disabled kids like this in this setting, you need your ass whipped. I'm serious. There is no excuse for this. I don't give a shit if it was 93 or 83. You just don't fucking do that. But anyway, all right. So, you got Jesse starts telling them exactly what they want to hear, that Damien, and Jason committed these murders. However, just like Coach said, there's inconsistencies in his story. Just one of the glaring ones is that Jesse says that the murders occurred in the daytime when we know they occurred after sundown. Now, He also states that they tied the boys up with rope and not their own shoelaces. So, of course, like we were talking about, these dickhead detectives keep molding Jesse into getting him to say exactly what they want him to say. And according to some, I guess, podcast, it is after 6 hours that they begin the taping, but the taping is stopped because they get so frustrated because Jesse can't remember what they want him to say. I think that they even wrote it down. Somebody said in one of the podcasts that I listened to about this that these dumbasses even wrote it down and just got him to sign it. So this is, this goes on for 12 hours. Well, at 9 p.m. on June the 3rd, after being just grilled without an adult present, without a lawyer present, authorities go before a municipal court judge to request search warrants to search the homes of Jesse, Damien, and Jason. Satanic panic, the judge issues it. An hour and a half later, after the warrants are issued, police arrest Damien, Jason, and Jesse. They charge each of them with 3 counts of capital murder. The next morning at 9 a.m., Gitchell holds a press conference to announce the arrests, and he is asked in this press conference, and it's out there forever, how confident he felt about the case on a scale of 1 to 10, and this is where he braggadociously says 11.
11. And he says that on TV to the public of potential jurors. That's not right.
Nope. Now, a Arkansas state judge appoints lawyers to represent each of the 3 defendants. And when I tell y'all, we're not going into the backstory of each of these, but Jesse, Damien, and Jason are just poor white kids growing up in West Memphis, Arkansas. There's a big deal. They're guilty because of the way they dress. They're guilty the way that they act towards authority before they're even arrested. I think, what was it? Jason was constantly wearing Metallica shirts, Damien,
they wore black. They listened to heavy metal.
That Damien had eyeliner and black fingernails.
Things that does not fit in with 1990s Arkansas.
No.
Not 1990s Georgia either. I promise you that much.
No. Or Tennessee or any small town in the South.
The great state of Alabama.
The University of Alabama.
There's not a single thing on this earth that I want to do that I can't do in lower Alabama.
Well, you left off that he has to go fishing in Louisiana. The 4 people that know us legitimately and know who we're talking about are shitting their pants right now.
Yeah, that guy's a trip.
There ain't nothing you or them pussies at the EPA can do a goddamn thing about it.
That's our coach. I got me a stump in my backyard, and this summer I'm gonna put me a tire around it, and I'm gonna dump me about a gallon of kerosene, and I'm gonna set it on fire. And there's not a thing you or the pussies in the EPA can do about it. I'm like, bro, I'm trying to teach class. Like you
That's the best thing
in front of my students.
I don't know if that story is all right. So there's that story, and then there's the story. He's over there eating. When he first got his big green egg, he started smoking ribs. Well, he'd bring like a slab of ribs to lunch, and we had the biology teacher's wife was substituting. And that's when he lost his cat. If I see that damn owl that got my cat, I'm going to shoot that son of a bitch. And the biology teacher's wife sitting at the lunch table goes, "You can't do that." He goes, "Well, last time I checked, Missy, they ain't bulletproof."
Oh my God, that dude needs to be on a podcast.
That guy needs a camera crew to follow his ass around.
Oh hell yeah!
Holy shit! All right,
That'd be
so
more popular than Honey Boo Boo.
oh, you damn right it would be. All right, so we were talking about how these three young men are, for the lack of a better word, and I can say this because I was borderline there. We were just all just poor white people, white kids growing up doing the best we could do in the fucking 90s. Okay, I was a little bit better off.
In your 30s and the 90s. What you talking about?
I graduated high school in May of 93.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was the same age as Damien. I am the same age as Damien, to be honest with you. Anyway, yeah.
I don't think you are. Hold on.
He may have a year on me.
You keep going. I'm looking it up.
Imagine that. So they basically have public defendants. Okay. Police interview again.
Damn. I'll be a son of a bitch.
Again.
You are the exact same age as him. I can't believe that. I thought he was my age.
No. Police appoint.
I'm just going to be over here. Shut the fuck up.
Police interview Vicky Hutchinson's 8-year-old son, Aaron, again. And Aaron now tells them that he actually witnessed the murders of the three boys, Christopher, Michael, and Stevie. So on August the 4th, you've got Damien, Jason, and Jesse attend a pretrial hearing before Judge David Burnett in Marion, Arkansas. Judge Burnett rules that Jesse Miskelly should be tried separately. Later, in another very important ruling, Judge Burnett allows or decides that the state can introduce Jesse's confession despite all the evidence that it was obtained under coercive circumstances, and that Damien and Jason can, along with Jesse, can be tried as adults rather than juveniles. Damien's the only one that's an adult in the eyes of the law at this time. The other two are 17. And Jesse may be 16. I'm not sure. So in September of 1993, prosecutor John Fogelman conducts a series of under oath interviews with various potential trial witnesses, including members of Damien, Jason, and Jesse's families. November the 10th, 1993, Judge Burnett rules that Miss Kelly's trial will open in Corning, Arkansas in January, and that the trial of Damien and Jason will take place in Jonesboro, Arkansas, beginning in February. Now, November 17th, 1993, divers hired by the Great Arkansas State Police search a lake behind the trailer behind the trailer park that Jason and Damien lived. During this miraculous search of this pond by divers, they find a 9-inch long knife with a serrated edge about 50 feet behind Jason's trailer. Now, during several documentaries later, it is determined that there is a fishing pier. Well, there's a pier that you can walk out on. And so basically the trailer park kids would go out there and they'd hang out on that pier and they would fish and they would just basically hang out. Well, when they were biting, the dads would take their kids out there. And long story short, Jason had a Rambo knife, is what everybody's calling it. I have no idea.
What was that?
I don't know. Y'all, there's ghosts in the machine. We don't know where the hell that came from.
I don't know anything.
But anyway, he had what we called a Rambo knife, and it was a 9-inch serrated knife that probably wouldn't cut hot butter. All them damn Rambo knives that you got at the flea markets wouldn't cut shit. But anyway,
they were they were terrible.
They were awful. But anyway, so he's messing around with it and drops it in the lake, and that's where the knife came from. But according to the Arkansas State Police, they scoured the bottom. Divers scoured the bottom of this lake, and they found this 9-inch long hunting knife, a serrated edge. Now, December 30th, 1993, defense attorney Ron Lax interviews neighbors of the Hutchinson neighborhood and is told that, I'm sorry, not the Hutchinson neighborhood. Oh, fuck. Interviews neighbors of Aaron Hutchinson, who was at the trailer park at the time of the murders, not in Robin Hood Hills, witnessing the murders as he had told police. Now, that's the guy that was almost hit by the lady riding around. So jury selection begins in Jesse Miskelly's trial in January of 1994. To be more specific, it was January the 18th. On January 26th, John Mark Byers is questioned by police about a knife belonging to him and that he had given to the documentary film producers. Now, this is a whole other tangent we could go down. Now, this knife was found to have blood on it consistent with that of his stepson, Christopher Byers, as well as John Mark Byers' blood, even though they were not.
Sure about that?
Yes, they were not biologically related. Now, here's where the blood was at. They took the handle on that thing. You could take the handle off. It was like a piece of plastic, or maybe it was that fake pearl looking shit. And when they took it off, there was dried blood underneath it. And I can't remember what documentary it was, but he gives it to them and they're fucking around with it, looking at it, and happens like one of those weird things. The light hits it just right. And they're like, man, is that like red fabric, or is that dried blood? Is that ketchup? And they're like, I don't know. And so they take it, thank God, and they have it. They don't take it apart, but they take it somewhere so that they don't contaminate it. And sure enough, not only is John Mark Byers' blood in there, so is Christopher Byers' blood. And like I said, they're not related. John marries Christopher's mother when John is very little and just adopts Christopher. So keep in mind, this shit's going on during the trial. All right, so on February 5th, 1994, a jury convicts Jesse Miskelly on 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. He is sentenced to 40 years in prison. He is sent to the Arkansas State Facility in Pine Bluff. Now, on March 18th, 1994... Baldwin and Eccles are found guilty of capital murder by a jury in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and they were tried together. And I never did understand why Miskelly was tried separately and first. Was it because the prosecution was going to use his testimony, or I guess his conviction?
That was the plan. They wanted him to implicate the other two. They were going to use his confession tape, and then they were going to have him testify at Damien and Jason's trial, but he refused, and therefore his confession was not allowed. It was inadmissible in the second trial.
And they bring in that, of course, the satanic cult expert who, under scrutiny after the trials, is an expert only in the fact that he took a correspondence course through the mail.
He's got a PhD in Satanology or something like that.
Yeah, and then everybody starts looking into him when these documentaries start coming out, and they're like, well, wait a minute. That's not even legit.
Even in the trial, the defense questioned him and asked him about his credentials, and he's like, yeah, I took a correspondence class, didn't really take any classes, just did his correspondence course and got a fucking PhD in
Satanology.
Occultism, Satanology, whatever. I don't even know what it is because it's bullshit. It's what it is. And they still let him testify. They still let him make these outrageous claims that these kids were mutilated because of Satan, and one of their penises was bit off by Jason because he wanted to absorb the power, or whatever the fuck it was. It's insane.
It is insane. And what I don't understand is I would say within mere minutes of finding all three boys' bodies in that little feeder creek on 10 Mile Bayou, this was an all hands on deck search. So there were two probation officers that we discussed earlier, and I'm not going to give them shitbags the satisfaction of us uttering their names again. But as everyone's starting to converge on the site where they find the boys' bodies, these two douchebags decide that it would be a good idea to go ahead and say, well, it looks like Damien Eccles finally went up and did it. He's done sacrificed 3 boys to Satan. Having zero evidence, not even knowing at the time if Damien was anywhere near the area, just because he was on probation and had I think he had been 1013 on suicidal ideations by his mother, and he was getting help. But like we said earlier, he was an 18-year-old anti-establishment, practicing Wiccan, anything he could do basically to thumb his nose at the man and society. And if you watch, I can't even remember which one it was. It had to be Paradise Lost, the first one. When they have him coming in, I guess, to the holding facility, and he's in street clothes and he's got his hands handcuffed in the front, he's playing it up, licking his teeth and stuff at the cameras. And again, it's
he thinks it's funny because, again, he just doesn't. He didn't do it. He didn't do it,
and he can't fathom the fact that
he can't fathom that they will actually find him guilty. To him, it's a big fucking joke until it is not. When they read that death penalty verdict, he got real fucking serious.
Real quick. So, March 19th, the next day. So, March 18th, Baldwin and Eccles are found guilty. The next day, Jason Baldwin gets life. Eccles gets the death penalty by lethal injection.
Yeah.
So
I think Jason got life and then plus 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. So April the 7th, Bob Lancaster skeptically reviews the trial in it's either, I think it's the Arkansas Times, but it may be the New York Times. Hell, it was wild. You know, this made like the ABC, NBC, CBS evening news every night. Now, the prosecutors convicted Eccles based on checking out certain suspicious books at the public library, copying a dark passage from Full of Sound and Fury, and that's from Shakespeare. So he's copying the macabre stuff that Shakespeare has written, and he's checked out books that they think, not they, but the establishment in the South would consider to be satanic. And here's the thing, kind of going back to Eccles, he's publicly saying he's not a Christian in the South. He's wearing all this dark clothing. He's painting his nails before most Gothic kids painted their nails. Well, I take that back. No, that's not true. My senior year, we had a couple. So, but anyway. So again, even, I guess he's guilty by his public persona. And Bob Lancaster says, God have mercy on him and the wrath from the Arkansas State Prosecution's Office if he had ever checked out Edgar Allan Poe. And that's the thing. There's no physical evidence tying him to the location. There's no physical evidence tying him to the boy's body. And I got on like an idiot, and I was telling Coach off air, like a moron, I got on Reddit, and, you know, Reddit is just full of, you think it's bad on the regular internet, you better get on Reddit and see a bunch of damn morons.
Yeah, no doubt.
But there was one guy saying that the reason that they had to take, well, I'm going to jump the shark, but well, I guess we'll talk about that when we get there. So anyway, all right, let's go back at it. So that's all they had. All they had was he dressed weird. Jason was friends with him and wore Metallica shirts. So I didn't realize that Jason was the youngest. He was 16. Jesse was 17 and Damien was 18. So they tried Jason as an adult. And the only thing that tied him to the whole case was that he was just friends with Damien. And in Miss Kelly's confession, air quotes, he said that Jason held the boys down and Damien took a stick and strangled them to death, which is totally opposite, false, whatever. There's no, that with, even with Miss Kelly's confession that they taped, the evidence doesn't even point to that. So again, it's just ripe with stupidity, I guess I should say. All right, so 1996, more specifically February 19th, the Arkansas Supreme Court refuses to overturn Miss Kelly's conviction. You talk about some good old boy cooking. I don't see how a normal functioning human can look at this evidence objectively and not see that that was a coerced confession.
Well, it's just, I mean, I think it's just a case of, mass hysteria. It's like they wanted this solved. They wanted this done. They wanted to punish who was responsible. And we're in the middle of the fucking satanic panic, and they found the guilty party, and they knew in their heart of hearts who it was. Evidence didn't matter at this point.
Yeah, June 22nd.
It didn't matter if they had all the evidence or no evidence. These boys were going down for this. 100%.
It's one of the worst miscarriages of justice this country's probably ever seen outside of the civil rights movement.
Offhand, I can't think of any.
I was going to say outside of the civil rights bullshit that went on.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, outside of that, this is probably the worst. So June 22nd, 1996, Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills is released. And it starts showing.
These guys, if you haven't, like we said when we started this is kind of a jumbled mess. We're going all kinds of crazy places because we're assuming that you know a good bit about this case already. But if you have not seen these documentaries, you really need to, because they had unprecedented access.
And knowing what you know now, it is extremely difficult to watch the trial proceedings.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard.
They allowed the documentary cameras to be in the courtroom. They interviewed the victims. The victims' families. They interviewed the three boys. They interviewed the three boys' families. They even got involved in the fucking trial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because John Mike Byers gave them a knife as a gift, and it had blood on it.
Exactly.
So they immediately turned it over to police, and they're mentioned by name in the trial. They're like the HBO documentary, blah, blah. Like
Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky.
I've never seen a documentary have this kind of access before. So go watch them.
Especially that first
7 hours, 3 parts.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially if you're not going to watch all of them. I don't recommend binging all of them because you will lose faith in humanity, but I do recommend doing the first one and then taking a break.
I binged them. I binged them recently for research.
So on December 23rd of 1996, the Arkansas Supreme Court rules again, this time refusing to overturn Baldwin and Eccles' convictions. Fast forward to 97, the only thing that's on the radar there is the U.S. Supreme Court. Basically, I can't remember what it's called, but they don't even bother with looking at Damien's appeal. So we fast forward to June 17th, 1999. Judge Burnett denies Damien's argument that his defense team was ineffective in the original trial and denies Damien's appeal for a new trial. December the 3rd is when Damien gets married to Lori Davis while imprisoned at Varner Supermax. June 22nd of 2000 is when Paradise Lost 2, The Revelation, starts airing on HBO, and it starts with the Free the West Memphis 3 movement and focuses on all the new evidence. Again, the Arkansas Supreme Court backs up Judge Burnett and denies Eccles' 1999 appeal, and that took them until October of 2003 to make a ruling. Took them 4 years, man.
That's crazy.
2 years after that, they deny Damien's petition for a new hearing. And then there's a little bit of traction. And that is on July 19th, 2007, the West Memphis police question Stevie Branch's mom and dad. And Terry Hobbs, who is now living in Bartlett, Tennessee, said that police requested an interview with him as a result of DNA tests on items found with the bodies. Terry says he is not bothered by the evidence and maintains he has no connection with the crime. Now, playing devil's advocate, Terry is the stepfather. Okay, so you would suspect his DNA would be on Stevie's clothing because they lived in the same house. And no one has ever said exactly where this new DNA evidence came from. Now we get into what most people who had not followed the trial before. It's on December 18th of 2007. The lead singer of the Dixie Chicks, Natalie Maines, and several other West Memphis 3 supporters present Governor Beebe with hundreds of postcards from supporters around the world asking for the pardon of the Jason, Jesse, and Damien.
Yeah, when we talk about their supporters, like, it can't be understated how powerful their supporters were, because we're talking the Dixie Chicks, we're talking Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, Metallica,
Johnny Depp,
and Eddie Vedder. I don't know if Johnny Depp was there, but I know for a fact Eddie Vedder was there when they got released.
Yes.
He was there hugging Jason's mom. I mean, they have strong support from some pretty powerful people.
With deep pockets.
Deep pockets.
Yes. So
that can't be understood.
The governor, toes the line and basically says he's not pardoning them and he is not commuting their sentences. So September.
So you were talking about Natalie Maines and Terry Hobbs when I interrupted you.
Well, no, I was just saying that she was basically leading the charge of that.
Well, she's going to make some allegations,
yes,
and Terry Hobbs is going to
sue the shit out of her.
I thought that's what you were getting to.
No, I was not, but you can go ahead and we can tackle that now because it's right there in the timeline. Go ahead.
I mean, like I said, we're fucking jumping all kinds of crazy. We're jumping around. We're like the House of Pain, But yeah, she's going to make some allegations that Terry Hobbs was responsible, and he's going to sue. And when he does, that opens him up to be deposed and questioned. And let me tell you,
he didn't think this through.
I don't know, man.
He did not take legal counsel.
Yeah, he didn't think it through for sure, but he does not come out of this looking good.
No, and
he really doesn't.
It's not as large of a contrast as Damien not thinking that it could go this route, but Terry goes, I guess his confidence thinks there's no way that this could turn sideways, but again, if you watch the documentary, he's a smug fuck.
Yeah. But he does not come out looking good.
Okay, so eventually in 2008, in September, Judge Burnett again denies a new trial for Eccles, but he also this time declines to hold a hearing to consider new DNA evidence. So they keep requesting, everybody is requesting a new trial, evidence to be thrown out, that kind of stuff. You've got the petition to the governor of Arkansas, that falls down. So Natalie Maines, Eddie Vedder, Johnny Depp, Ben Harper, and Patti Smith all hold a concert/rally in Little Rock to raise even more awareness. and funds to help the defense and appeals process. And this was in August 28th of 2010. Just a month later, the Arkansas Supreme Court would hear oral arguments to determine whether there should be an evidentiary hearing for a new trial. At issue is each side's interpretation of the state's DNA statute and the definition of intent behind the law that grants access to DNA testing and possibly relief for those wrongly convicted of crimes. Now, former state senator Kevin Smith, who wrote the state's DNA statute, says that the intent of the law is clear, quote, to allow a new trial or venue for post-conviction relief in cases just like this one, end quote. So the guy that authored the bill is telling the state Supreme Court, this is why we wrote the bill, and their interpretation is, oh, no, that's not how we're interpreting it. But on November the 4th, the state unanimously orders a new circuit court evidentiary hearing for Jason, Jesse, and Damien. The court says that the circuit judge must consider not only the DNA evidence presented by the defense, but any other exculpatory evidence, including evidence that was not presented in the original trials. So February 18th of 2011, attorneys for the West Memphis Three, Jason, Jesse, and Damien, file briefs on evidence and testimony they hope to develop in the Arkansas Supreme Court. And this is, I guess, like a pretrial testimony of basically asking them to grant a new trial. What they're asking is, again, based around the DNA and the physical evidence from the case, including skin samples from the victims and their clothing. All three men want to call as witness the father of one of the victims and one of his friends because they are likely sources of DNA that was found in physical evidence, though no trace of the man convicted was found. So what they're saying to the court is this: hey, you have convicted us, you've sentenced us to life in prison and the death penalty, and you can't find our DNA on their bodies, on their clothes, on anything that was surrounding them. However, you can find DNA from Terry Hobbs, which I said, that's a double-edged sword. He did live in the house, so his would be there. But what is not explained is why his friend's DNA is on the kids, all of the kids' clothing. And, Terry, why is your...
Are we talking about Jacoby?
Yes.
His friend?
Yeah.
I think it's Ronald Jacoby, I think.
So why would Terry's DNA be on Michael Moore and Christopher Byers' clothes? It's easily explained away if we're only talking about Stevie Branch, because that's his stepson.
Well, and when two of the boys were found, they were all three tied up, right wrist to right ankle, left wrist to left ankle. All three of them were tied the same way, except two of them had matching knots. They were all tied the same way, but the third one, they were knotted a completely different way. And so that would lead you to believe that there was definitely at least two people involved.
Correct.
So that would make sense. It's very hard to do that. Do what they did. Do what happened to three children by yourself. It's very difficult, I would assume. I've never brutally murdered three children.
So on March 17th of 2011, Circuit Judge David Laser of Jonesboro actually schedules a hearing for October the 1st to listen to the petitions and look at having all this DNA retested. Fast forward to August 19th of that year, and all of a sudden the state has a change of heart, and they present Damien, Jason, and Jesse with a plea arrangement known as an Alford plea.
Alford plea. Let me take over for you, sir. An Alford plea. An Alford plea is a guilty plea in criminal court whereby the defendant in a criminal case does not admit to the criminal act but concedes that there's enough evidence to convict them. It was a United States Supreme Court case, North Carolina versus Alfred in 1970. Henry Alfred was indicted for a charge of first-degree murder in 1963. He swore he didn't do it, but he knew that they had enough evidence to say he did, including witnesses, blah, blah, blah. And so he decided to plead guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. An Alfred plea is you assert your innocence.
But say the state's got enough evidence that they could convict.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And here's the thing. They present this to everyone separately. Jesse's like, yep, get me out of jail. Damien's like, hell yeah, get me off death row. Jason's like, fuck you. I didn't do a damn thing. I'm not doing shit. And he was like 10 toes down, heels dug in. And I think Damien's wife or Damien's immediate family got in touch with Jason and basically said, hey, Jason, we understand that you don't want to do this, but we're asking you to please consider it because they're going to put Damien to death. They will let him, ride the lightning. And so that's the only reason. And
the only reason why Jason does it is to get Damien off death row. Jason definitely wanted to keep fighting.
Yes. And in the post-trial where they say yes and they take this plea, he is very adamant about how they have been railroaded and how even the Alfred plea is not fair. That it's still bullshit. So,
well, what this means is
it means that the dickheads can still say it's convicted crime.
Yeah, Arkansas considers it a closed case. These guys didn't do it.
No, they didn't.
But Arkansas considers it a closed case. That means they are not going to investigate any further. They are not going to try to find the true killer. They are not going to do anything. So whomever perpetrated this horrible crime has gotten away with it scot-free.
Going into, and we kind of touched on this earlier, and like Coach said, we're jumping all over the place. But here's what you have to understand. There is some evidence that comes out later that, we talked about the lady Narlene Hollingsworth almost hitting 3 boys on their bicycles. Well, that leads you to believe there was a 4th boy in the picture, which there was. No one knows who that 4th boy is. Now, in Bob Ruff's investigation, he tracks down a man named George Taylor. And George Taylor had been on the Free West Memphis 3 message board stating that he had been with all 3 boys and had actually gone into the Robin Hood Hills woods with them the day they disappeared. However, he left under some circumstances. Well, when Bob gets to him, I'm trying to do this politically correct. It's if you watch the interview that Bob has with him, within about 10 seconds you realize George really wants to help. George lost 3 of his best friends that day because he was the same age. But George is almost projecting, like he knows too many specific details because it's been said that the 4th boy was wearing green shorts and a black shirt. When Bob asked him, hey, were you with them? And he kind of talks to him through the interview and he goes, well, do you remember what you were wearing? He was like, yep, I remember it clear as day. I had on green shorts and a black shirt. And that's hard to remember. And also keep in mind, when you hear George talk about certain things, he's functioning in society is all I can tell you. He's doing the best he's doing the best he can do, and his heart's in the right place. And I mean no ill will. I mean no disrespect to George. Like I said, he's a victim in this as well. He lost. It's hard to be 8 years old and lose 3 of your best friends, and no one knows what happened. And then you hear about these satanic rituals and shit like that. So you kind of have to, when you look into this, there is a 4th boy out there. No one knows who that 4th boy is. So, but anyway, during Bob's investigation, he also talks to the Posey guy who says that he saw Bobby Posey, and he said that he saw Christopher Byers around between 3 and 3:30, and Chris told him, I'm running away because my dad whipped me again. And he told him, no, you need to get your butt back home. And he says, nope, I'm leaving. Well, during Bob's interview with Posey says, hey, you need to talk to my buddy, Carlos Seals. He saw all 3 of them with sleeping bags. And he's like, word? What'd you say? And so he gets in touch with Carlos Seals, who still lives, I think, in the neighborhood. And he takes Carlos to where Carlos says he sees him. And there's actually 2 entrances into the Robin Hood Hills. There's one off near where Carlos was at on Goodwin, I think's the name of the street. And then there's the one where they theorize the boys went in. I'll say this. I don't know if you could even nail it down to that's where they went in. That's where all the evidence is at. Their bikes are found on each side of that pipe, and then they're off that little feeder creek. Carlos says, when he saw them, they all had sleeping bags. They all were going, quote, camping, and that was between 5:30 and 6. So this goes back to our original thing about how you've got a window now between 6:30 and 8:30 for the murder to actually have taken place. I don't know, man. It's extremely, extremely odd that all of a sudden they're going to, I guess, go camping, and we're just spitballing here. But this goes back to, Pam told Stevie when he left with Michael riding their bikes, you better have your tail back in an hour because I've got to, I got to go to work. And so in an hour, they are, I would say within 15, 20 minutes. And this is just my theory out in left field. They run into, so you got Stevie and Michael on their bikes. They run into Chris. He's pissed because he's gotten a whipping. And I was correct earlier. He had previously gotten a whipping for riding the skateboard down the road on his belly, but that was not why he got whipped that day. That day it's because he was acting like a jackleg in school, and John Mark decided to teach him a lesson. But we'll get into that in a second about some of the things that Mr. Byers does. But going back to what I was originally saying, so you got Stevie and Michael. They run into Christopher. Christopher says, look, my dad's just whipped me. I'm running away. And they're like, well, we're going to go camp. We're going to camp with you, or we're going to run away with you. We'll live in the Robin Hood Hills. But this all has to take place within a very short amount of time because, and I may be wrong, but the way I get it from everything I've seen of Pam Hobbs, she's not a woman to be trifled with. I don't see Stevie coming back to the house and getting his sleeping bag without his mama going, oh, hell no, you're not.
I don't think so.
I don't know. So you've got that whole thing. Now, in the other thing in the not preview, heck, in that documentary is they interview Christopher's brother. So no, I was correct in my first. See, you got me doubting my own research over here, boss. Man, you got me all
I ain't do nothing.
discombobulated.
I ain't done nothing, man.
You got me all discombobulated. So anyway, and again, it's you either gonna love this episode or you're gonna be like, man, I love how they just spitball it, or you're gonna be like, what the hell's wrong with these two dumbasses?
Well, all I'm saying is don't let just this podcast be your only information about this case. Don't just go with us. We're going to get a negative review just like we did with Maura Murray, even though we warned people several times.
Yeah, and I will say this. Coach hit me up with True Crime Garage has done 7 episodes on this case, and we could easily do
like
7.
I said, they always do that. Like 5 or 6 times they've released something right before we do. But this time, in the past 5 days, is May 11th, In the past 5 days, they've released 7 episodes on the West Memphis 3.
Yeah, they re-released their original 3 or 4, and then they re-released their follow-up episodes. So if you want an in-depth, deep dive, listen to them first, and then you can come back and go, man, that's just 2 guys talking in a basement about how this case is fucking crazy. And it is. It is. That's exactly what we're going for. So Ryan Clark is Christopher Byers' brother. So when John Mark Byers marries Melissa Byers, he adopts Christopher. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Christopher was less than 2 years old when they got married. So basically, that's all. Christopher's the only dad he's known has been John Mark Byers. However, Ryan was old enough, and at the time of the murder of Chris, Michael, and Stevie, he was 16. And when we get into some craziness, the day of the murders, Ryan has to go to traffic court. So he gets picked up from school. Now, Christopher, remember, has been spanked for basically getting sent home for acting a fool. So John Mark Byers picks up Ryan Clark to take him to traffic court. He tells Ryan, I had to spank your brother because he was acting a fool today, and he's at home cleaning up the garage or the carport. And so Ryan didn't think anything about it. He said, that's typical Chris behavior. He clowning around and got in trouble. So they go to traffic court. He drops him off at traffic court. I take that back. He then comes back and takes Melissa to work, drops Melissa off at work, and then comes back and picks up Ryan Clark from traffic court. So between dropping his wife off and picking up his stepson, Ryan Clark, there's a window of time. John Mark Byers' whereabouts, his actions are unaccounted for. And I'll just leave it at that and let you draw your own conclusions. I will say that in Bob Ruff's interview with Ryan says all of that footage that you see in the documentaries of John Mark yelling for the boys, for holding Christopher's picture and saying, you weren't my flesh and blood, but I treated you like that and I loved you dearly. He said all of that was horseshit. That he mistreated Christopher, and at one point he remembers Chris doing something to get in trouble, and John Mark saying, I'm going to spank you, but you need to go ahead and take your pants down. And he left him standing pantsless in the kitchen for up to an hour before he whipped him. So that's just mental anguish. I'm all about disciplining your kid, but you got to do it in the moment. It's awful hard.
Yeah, that's excessive.
Yeah, it's awful hard for an 8-year-old mind to keep, oh yeah, I remember I acted like a fool 2 hours ago, so this is why I'm getting a whipping. But anyway, so again, this is all evidence out there that you can look at. Now, when we were looking at this, what do you think? 75% of people that watch the Paradise Lost documentaries and the West of Memphis documentary, you think they lean towards the way we lean in the perpetrator?
I think the third Paradise Lost definitely tries to lean towards what we believe. West of Memphis, it kind of stays neutral, but I mean, I don't want to get sued by accusing the person we believe, but
well, let's just stop right there because that's how I'm going to segue.
I'm just going to say this. The 3 people that went to jail did not do it.
No.
The person that did it they knew at least one of the victims very intimately.
And that's exactly what I was going to tie into.
Close family member.
Yeah.
Of one of the kids.
FBI profiler, Jim Clemente, who retired as a FBI supervisory agent, actually creates a suspect profile in the Forgotten West Memphis 3. And he tells Bob Ruff that there was no indication forensically that there's more than one offender involved because what happened to each of the victims was consistent. He theorized that the killer knew the victims because he was able to, quote, control 3 victims without any help. If some stranger who looked very threatening had approached these boys, Clemente feels like that their first reaction would be to run away and scatter and look for help. 2 of them have bicycles, remember, okay? There's absolutely no indication of that happening in this case. So that led Clemente to say that the offender was someone they knew. He goes on to state that he believes the assailant was a male in his 30s who is either biologically related to one or more of the victims, a family member, or a very close community member. Quote, if they thought they could trust the person who was the actual threat, then the person could get close enough to them to control them so that they couldn't run away. If the offender came across the boys as they were doing something wrong or misbehaving, it would have been even easier to control and reprimand them. And perhaps the punishment went, quote, too far, and it resulted in a triple homicide. This was a result of getting enraged, going too far, and then having to basically clean up the mess. Based on the way the boys were tied up, the way their hands bound on either side of their body to the same ankle, Clemente theorizes that the suspect is somebody who works with animal carcasses, has a butcher's background, or is an avid hunter. And in the way that he ties this in, and he says the ligatures are not restraining ligatures. They seem to me to be more practical ligatures, but what is the purpose of that? Well, it minimizes the package a little bit, and it makes it easier to control after they have expired. So remember, when investigators find the bodies of these 3 boys, it's just by happenstance because they see a muddy shoe on the bank of that feeder creek. And they're trying to get to it. One of the searchers falls in the mud, and when he does, he's trying to drag his feet out of the thick mud of that creek, and when he does, he dislodges one of the bodies. And I don't remember which one came up first. But then, just a few feet down the stream, he finds the other 2. And then, while they're scouring for the other 2 bodies, they start running across these sticks that have been jammed down into the mud. Well, under the sticks are all the clothing. And the way that it's theorized at the end of Bob Ruff's little miniseries things is that you've got an enraged male that finds their bicycles on the neighborhood side of the pipe, knows they're in the woods, goes in there and catches them doing something or catches them after dark knowing that they should be home. Something is said, a discipline act has taken place, and either knocks that boy unconscious to the point where the assailant thinks that he's killed him, and now he's in cleanup mode. Now he's got to get rid of the other 2. What he doesn't realize is he's not killed him. They just knocked his ass out because all 3, if you look at the autopsy reports, all 3 died from drowning. That's the cause of death. I said I wasn't going to go into it, but we're going to have to. I'm not going to go into it very deep. The pictures are out there. The autopsy reports are out there. But anyway, one of them had been emasculated. And if you don't know what that means, it means you can look it up. And then one of the boys had severe lacerations to his face. The other one had lacerations to his groin area and, I'm sorry, not his groin area, his shoulder, back of his shoulder and around the front of his chest. One thing that you realize real quick is, unless you're a West Memphis 3 policeman, all of these injuries occurred post-mortem. And any pathologist that would have looked at this would have come to that conclusion. There's no hemorrhaging around the wounds. They're very inconsistent. They're ragged. And upon investigation of that 10 Mile Bayou, you have several different species of turtles. I wish I had that sound clear. I like turtles. But anyway.
I like turtles.
So anyway.
It's definitely like during the trial, they're going to equate the scratches, the mutilation to Satanism. But any fucking person with a fucking clue would know that is predation by some sort of wildlife. And in that area, we have alligator snapping turtles.
You have what do they call that other one? The red.
They're going to try to eat whatever they can. And what are they going to target? They're going to target the softest, the most available items they can get. They're going to attack like ears, nose, and penis. So during the trial, they're going to claim that Jason. It fucking angers me so much. They're going to say that Jason bit off the penis to absorb the power of the child. No, it was a fucking alligator snapping turtle that saw an easy meal.
Yes. And it shows, if you will look at, and it's hard to separate yourself. I just don't. If I was younger and I got into the profession, I may have been able to compartmentalize it, but I just can't fucking do it now. But anyway, you have to like step back and take yourself out of the situation with what you're looking at. But once you just look at the picture of the wounds, you realize real quick that there was some other kind of turtle, red something, and then they've got like another little turtle. Well, all these turtle species have very long, sharp claws. And so what they'll do is they'll dig those front claws in and push in, or like pull whatever it is they're trying to eat towards them. So you're going to get the ripping of the skin that way. And it doesn't even look that way. I'm not even going to entertain that. But anyway, it pulls it apart and then it starts taking the little pincher looking things and it's going to create these ragged looking holes. What the authorities say is that, and what part of what Jesse says in his false confession, is that they were hesitation marks. They were torturing them by just barely cutting them. And that's not the case. And it like I said, any forensic pathologist, any person with a medical background immediately says, hey, there's no way in hell this came from a knife, especially the knife that they're saying they found. But anyway. All right, so you got all that. Yeah, one of them said that, was it in the trial that they quoted, Jason held him down, Damien bit his penis off as a offering to something. I can't remember. But anyway, all of it's bullshit. Like I said, there's no physical evidence tying Damien, Jason, and Jesse to those boys, to the scene, other than you've got somebody saying they saw two kids in muddy pants. But my problem with that whole thing is you've got Damien's mother, as far as I know, does not have a criminal background, saying, no, that's not him. His ass was sitting right here. And then they contact the two girls that he was talking to on the phone across the Mississippi in Arkansas, or I'm sorry, in Arkansas, in Memphis. And they're like, yeah, we talked to him from this time to this time. So there's no fucking way he could have done it. But anyway, all right, so you got that. You've got the turtle predation, so that explains it away. The only thing that is not explained away in the autopsy is there's some odd, regular-shaped wounds to the top of one of the boys' heads. The forensic pathologist they interview in Bob Ruff's investigation states that she would theorize that this could have been an object that had a pointed edge, not a sharp edge. So like a square-edged piece of lumber, like the spindles on a porch. Some of those are kind of very defined edges, or the edge of a stick, in an angled piece of metal. And she doesn't expound a whole lot, but through what she states, what Clemente says in his theory, it leads you to believe that almost like he the person that killed these boys is just dressing them up one side and down the other, and one of them interrupts him, and he pops. He's got something in his hand that he's like shaking at him. You know, if you don't do, you're always getting in trouble. Da, da, da. And then somebody pops off at him or interrupts him, and he gets pissed and he pops him on the head and knocks him out. And now he thinks he's killed him. So now he thinks that he's got to do the same thing to the other three. And now you have just a shitty situation going even worse. But here's the thing. In the whole perpetrator theory, Clemente even says whoever killed them had to take time and have enough mental capacity to not only realize, oh shit, I've just killed this kid. I've got to kill his two friends, but they also had the mental capacity to remove themselves from what they've done at the moment to conceal not only the bodies, but the clothing and the bikes, all at the edge of darkness. Quote, he had to spend this time because if he didn't, he would get caught. I think he spent more time on concealing the bodies and the clothing and the bikes than he did on the actual murders. The time spent to conceal them could have been skipped completely if there was no known relationship to the victims. In addition to the perpetrator being a male who had a relationship with one or more of the victims, the suspect was from the neighborhood. And Clemente theorizes that the reason he leads to him being from the neighborhood is that whoever it was hid the bodies in order to give himself enough time to establish an alibi. The assailant is also prone to violent outbursts, likely has a history of domestic violence, and places a high importance on punishment. Quote, I believe there was an incident of over-disciplining one of the boys. It went too far, and because of that, he had to kill all three of them. And that will lead you to the suspect that me and Coach think and lean to. We are not going to verbally say that because we like living in our squalor that it is, and we don't want to.
Terry Hobbs. It's Terry Hobbs. Just saying. Call me crazy, but it's Terry Hobbs, man.
Yeah.
He can sue me all he wants, man. He can't get shit from me. I don't have shit. But yeah, I think Terry Hobbs is guilty of it. And I think his friend helped him. That is not the opinion of Arlo. That is the opinion of Coach. So if you would like to sue, open yourself up, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be called as a character witness for you. But here's the thing. The timeline that we've established, I think, is more likely what happened. I'm not 100%. Here's why I keep doubting my own memory. Before we started this, I had to get off of the rabbit hole that was the Maury Murray incident.
Yeah.
And what does my dumbass do? Yeah, let's look into this West Memphis 3 thing. So for about 6 months, I devoured everything pertaining to this case. Every podcast episode, every documentary, every Dateline, whodunit. I watched them all. And so all of this information's running around in this little pea brain of mine. But there is a lady that wrote an affidavit that says she saw the 3 boys playing in her backyard between 5:30 and 6. Now, this is in direct contrast to Ryan Clark's statement. And remember, Ryan Clark is Christopher Byers' brother. Ryan said in this lady's affidavit, she states that her and Ryan Clark walked home from school the day of the murder, or the day the boys disappeared, and the day of the murder, because we're theorizing that it occurred that evening. And that when they got to her house, the boys were playing in the backyard, and she told them to go home. Not only could this not be true because of what we talked about earlier with the SEALs guy that Bob interviewed. He says that he saw him with the backpacks and on the bicycles and on the other side of the neighborhood from where this lady is saying it happened. But it also is in contrast because, keep in mind, Ryan's at traffic court. There's no way he could have been walking her home. Mark Byers picks him up from school, takes him to traffic court, drops him off so that he can go through whatever the hell he's got to go through, takes his wife to work, then comes back and picks him up. There's no way this lady could have walked home with him. And so Bob tries to be like, all right, Ryan, is this, could this be just her misremembering a day? And he was like, no, I hadn't walked her home in weeks. And when we did walk home, we would stop at like a cross street and she would continue to her house and I'd go to my house. So this whole thing is convoluted. And I was telling my wife before we recorded, people like that lady piss me off. What is the mentality where you want to interject yourself into a case like that and just come up with flat out lies? Not only are they flat out lies, but they can be disproven because your dumbass named another person that they can go and check. I just don't get it. I really don't. I don't fucking understand people that do that. But anyway. All right. So we have everybody and their mother, the theories. Going back to Terry Hobbs, he has a little bit of a checkered past. When he was 24, he broke into the home of a neighbor, one Mildred French, who reported that prior to the incident, she had gone to Terry's home after hearing what she believed to be a domestic dispute. A couple of months later, Ms. French contacted the police and her landlord after Hobbs reportedly came into her home and grabbed her breastises. She yelled for him to get out of her home. I was yelling for Terry to get out, and ultimately Terry ran out of my home and ran downstairs into his unit. The bathroom window over my tub was partially open, and my yelling could be heard outside. I recall a man was outside across the street working in the yard. I believe that Terry intended to further molest and or harm me because his actions and demeanor indicated that was his goal. But I believe my continued yelling and screaming alarmed him and caused him to run off. At this time, I was afraid that Terry would rape, harm, or even kill me. Now, in November of 1994, more than a year after the murder of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie, old Terry gets in trouble with the law again, and this is after an altercation with his wife, Pam, where he reportedly hit her and shot his brother-in-law.
He didn't reportedly shot his brother-in-law. He shot his brother-in-law.
Right. Jackie Jr. Hicks came to the Hobbs residence after he was informed of the altercation between Pam and Terry. Terry would later state that he shot Jackie Jr. in self-defense. Jackie Jr. survived the shooting but died years later as a result of the complications pertaining to those injuries. Terry was sentenced to 6 months in prison for aggravated assault. In 2003, they get him for possession of the devil's lettuce. I don't know. Looking at John Mark Byers, he had a criminal charge relating to the use of terroristic threats, grand theft, and drug use. One of the terroristic threats pertained to domestic dispute between him and his first wife, Sandra Byers. In 1988, it was alleged that he threatened her life and assaulted her with an electronic stunning device. Byers was 30 years old when he accumulated this charge, and he was 35 when Judge Burnett expunged it from his record. Despite the record having been expunged, documents detailing the charges were found at the Crittenden County Court by journalist Mara Leverett. In 1973, the parents of Mark Byers called the police claiming that their son was threatening them with a butcher knife. The incident took place in his hometown of Mart Tree, Arkansas. In October of 1990, the owners of a jewelry store that Byers previously worked for pressed charges against him for allegedly stealing $65,000 in jewelry. The police did not arrest Mark, and so the owners took the complaint to the civil courts, filing a lawsuit against Byers and another couple. In 1991, Byers was ordered by the court to return the jewelry to the owners. In July of 1992, he was arrested again for, quote, conspiring to sell cocaine and with carrying a dangerous weapon, end quote. He was booked into county jail in Memphis, Tennessee, and was placed into the custody of the U.S. Marshal Service. Now, shortly before the murders of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie, in December of 1992, just 6 months prior, Byers again faced criminal charges regarding $11,000 in stolen Rolex watches. Detective, I hate this motherfucker, but anyway, Byrne Ridge and Mike Allen were contacted by the UPS, United Postal Service, about the matter, reporting that the watches had been delivered to Byers and he was denying the shipment occurred. This matter had not been settled by the time that the three boys were murdered in May of 1993. Byers eventually confessed to receiving the watches and selling them to a chiropractor in another town. Brent Davis made the recommendation that he not be prosecuted. Byers was asked to pay $7,500 in restitution, which would allow him to avoid criminal prosecution. Here's my question. Why is the judge that presided over the criminal charges against Damien, Jason, and Jesse expunging shit from Byers' record? That's the same person that expunged the terroristic threats. I don't get it. You talk about home cooking at its finest. I just do not. I don't get it, man. It's not even gross incompetence.
It's frustrating to even think about because it's just the biggest miscarriage of justice in history. I cannot think of anything more that was just, I don't know. I don't even know what to say, honestly. It's insane. Everything about this case is insane because these fucking kids didn't do it. They spent 20-something years in jail.
Yeah. And the thing is, for all the people out there that say that Jesse, Jason, and Damien are guilty, why would they champion new DNA testing? Why are they funding? Like, Jason has funded damn near everything he can to help get Pam Hobbs closure. They're actually friends now.
Yeah. Everyone involved in the case, the victims' families, every single one of them changed their opinion and believed that the West Memphis 3 was innocent, except for one person. That's Terry Hobbs.
Yep.
Terry Hobbs is like, oh no, they're the ones that are guilty. They got them right. They're the ones that were guilty. Pamela Hobbs, John Mark Byers, who, when you watch the documentaries, the first one, he's like shooting targets, going, "That's one for you, Jesse.
Yeah,
that's one for you, Damien." Like, I will piss on your grave and you will burn in hell. Even he changed his mind, and he believed Terry Hobbs was the perpetrator. Everyone involved in this case, except for Terry Hobbs, the judge, and the prosecutor, believe that these three were not involved.
It just gripes my ass. All right, so we're going to start wrapping this thing up because we're everywhere. One thing we wanted to touch on before we got to the more relevant information in this case was the theory of Mr. Bojangles. So on the night of May 5th, the night they disappeared and was murdered, the West Memphis Police Department got a call from the Bojangles restaurant just across 10 Mile Bayou, further down from Robin Hood Hills. The complaint was that there was an African-American male who had entered the restaurant covered in mud and blood and appeared to be confused sitting in the women's bathroom. The report stated that the man had gotten blood and feces on the floor of the women's restroom and there was blood on the wall from his arm. The restaurant, which was located roughly a mile from where the bodies were found, had this call come in at 8:42. The man was never identified or found, so therefore he was dubbed Mr. Bojangles. Now, the West Memphis Police Department...
Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles. Dance. I knew a man Bojangles and he danced for you. Anyway.
And worn
It's a great
out
song.
shoes.
It's a great song.
All right, so the West Memphis Police Department took blood scrapings, but the scrapings were, imagine that, lost somehow and never recovered. It has been speculated that Mr. Bojangles could be responsible for the murders. A hair belonging to a person of African descent was found at the crime scene, but since the blood samples from the walls were lost, there's no way to know if the hair is from the same person. The defense used the theory of Mr. Bojangles in their arguments. Here's the thing. They did do a recreation of both exposed. Basically, Bob Ruff tied up fucking pieces of chicken, threw it in 10 Mile Bayou, and within about 4 or 5 hours, the turtles had just ripped it to shreds. So that, kind of proves turtle predation on bodies. He also hired someone to travel from the pipe to Bojangles, and the man did it in like 17 minutes. But he started on the neighborhood side of the bayou and had to cross the bayou to get to Bojangles. My theory is, if Mr. Bojangles was involved, he would have come out of that feeder creek, which is on the opposite side, same side as Bojangles, and he would have just traveled down the bank. Therefore, he could have had mud and blood on him. If he's on the other side, the neighborhood side of 10 Mile Bayou, and has to cross the bayou to get to Bojangles, he's going to wash all of that mud and blood off of him by crossing that bayou. My gut, I don't think the man was involved. I think he probably got into an altercation somewhere else, had the shit beat out of him, probably got brained, and was in there trying to get his wits about him. But that's just my personal opinion. What say you, Coach? You think Mr. Bojangles is involved?
I don't think so. I don't know exactly what happened with him and why why the events transpired the way they did, but I don't think he's involved. I really don't.
Okay, so to just put a final nail in the incompetence of the West Memphis Police Department, they didn't canvass the neighborhood or the Mayfair Apartments, which basically looked right across at the pipe where these boys would have crossed into Robin Hood Hills. They knocked on doors, but if you didn't answer, they didn't ever follow back up. And there were several statements made by people that actually answered the door that would throw the investigation in a total different path. But remember, within about 5 minutes of finding the bodies, they had convicted Damien. They were just trying to find the evidence to use against him. Now, we did this case because roughly, almost 3 weeks ago, the Supreme Court of Arkansas decided that after 30 years, they were going to allow new DNA testing to be done on the evidence, the knots of the tennis shoes and things like that. One of our lovely listeners, Ms. Sizemore, followed the opinions of the court. Now, here's the thing that I had a problem with. The Arkansas Supreme Court ruled 8-1. You had someone basically say, nah, we don't need to test that DNA evidence in a 30-year-old case. And it was Judge Webb. And if memory serves me correctly, Mr. Webb's dumbass said it would be an injustice to the legal system to allow such testing to be done. What in the fuck are you smoking, mister? An injustice was done 30 years prior when you railroaded these 3 teenagers and stuck them in prison for 20 years. That's the injustice. Miss Sizemore and I had some text back and forth, and I called him a douche canoe, and she's like, ooh, I like that. Total douche canoe. So, I don't mean to keep beating a dead horse, but listen, if you are never heard of this, there are books on it. Damien's written 2 or 3. 2, I think. His wife's written one.
At least 2. Maybe more.
There is The
Devil's Knot.
Yeah,
Devil's Knot Untied, I think, is the second part. There's
Untying the Knot.
Paradise Lost documentaries. Yeah. There's the West of Memphis documentary.
There is a book that came out in 2012 written by Greg Day called Untying the Knot, John Mark Byers and the West Memphis 3. Damien has a book called...
the Knot, that's it.
Yeah, Damien has a book called Life After Death. Almost Home, My Story, Volume 1. And then The Devil's Knot, The True Story of the West Memphis 3 is another book. The Last Pinnacle of the Sun, Writings in Support of the West Memphis 3 was released. And then there is a video short story movie starring Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth called The Devil's Knot. You've got Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, Paradise Lost 2, The Revelations, Paradise Lost 3, Purgatory, and then you have West of Memphis. And West of Memphis was Peter Jackson, the same Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings. And then there's bukus of articles, news videos. I'll try to remember this. It's like a links and bibliography page. We'll try to post a link to it. But y'all, it's just... And the problem is, it's like the state of Arkansas does not want these 3 boys' murders to be solved because they keep fucking dragging their feet. Just test the evidence. It's like Jean Bonnet. Test the fucking evidence and get it over with. You say that you are a champion for justice. Somewhere along the lines, each one of those law enforcement officials, assistant DAs, Supreme Court justices in Arkansas took an oath that you were going to champion the cause for the little guy that gets fucked. And not only have you not done that, you have consistently screwed over not only Damien, Jason, and Jesse, but you are pissing on the memory of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie by not solving this fucking case. And it could have been solved if they had not had blinders on at the very beginning and they did legitimate police work. It could have been solved. And when I say legitimate police work, I'm not saying that they were incompetent in solving it. But you show me another small town in America that has ever had a triple homicide of 3 8-year-olds. You're in over your head. You are in over your head. Call in fucking backup. Call in the state, call in the feds, call in whoever the hell you've got to. And I always go back to this argument. If it was your sons laying in that ditch, hell hath no fury. All stones would be turned over so that you could find who did it. I'm very passionate about the fact that we've lost sight of the original victims of this case. And thank God, Bob Ruff, at the end of that documentary, he issues a challenge to everybody that listens to his podcast. The Truth and Justice podcast, he calls them his warriors. He said, you've got to keep putting pressure on the state of Arkansas and all of these people, and we've got to get this DNA tested. And it took for fucking ever. But it did. They finally petitioned the state, and it's going to be tested. Finally. Hopefully, we get some conclusions, but I'm not holding my breath. All right, so that's our convoluted way of talking about the West Memphis 3. When I tell you that if we did this case like we normally do cases,
I mean, it would be like at least 5 or 6 parts, man, if we really wanted to do it. But again, like we said,
it's been done 100 times.
It's been done. We're assuming you know a lot about this case already. If you don't, go do your research before you listen to us. Don't let us be the only source of information. Please.
Yeah.
Don't leave us a negative review.
Because we didn't do
because
it.
You did.
Yeah, we didn't talk
we
about.
didn't do this case justice because we told you we're not going to. It's just.
There's things we couldn't get to. We didn't get to the hitchhiker. We didn't get to Dominique Tier. We didn't get to, Dominique and Damien were thicker than thieves. And that whole angle. We didn't get to the shit that went on when they dove the pond and found the map. We didn't get to Ryan Clark.
We didn't talk about the witness who later recanted his story and apologized to Damien and said that I was on a lot of drugs at that time and I did what I did because I was going to get a lesser sentence or whatever.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot of things. There's so much to this case. It's insane.
It will hurt your brain if you allow it to. But I will say this, if you're a true crime junkie looking for a new rabbit hole to dive down and drown in, this one's for you. You'll lose quite a bit of your life to this.
Well, just watch. I mean, the only thing I could recommend for sure, if you're not going to do anything else, is watch the 3 Paradise Lost documentaries. It's insane what happened. But the bottom line is, whether or not we know, I have an opinion on who did it. You have an opinion on who did it. No matter what, someone fucking tortured and murdered 3 innocent children. For what reason, we don't know. But they got away with it. They got away with it. They're free. They are not being punished for this crime, and they absolutely should be. It is a travesty that these 3 children died. It's a travesty that they died. It's a travesty how they died. And it's a travesty that the person responsible is not being punished for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
If you believe in heaven and hell, I promise you, whoever did this is going to hell.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself.
But on Earth, they are
free as a bird. Free. Yeah. So my recommendation would be that you watch the Forgotten West Memphis 3. It's 3 hours. I think they busted it up into 3 episodes when it originally aired on Oxygen Network. If you have the Oxygen Network app, it's Oxygen On Demand. You can find it there. If you don't, I think it's like $3.50. You can buy it on Prime, or you can rent it on Prime for $2.99. I highly recommend it. They do a phenomenal job in just 3 hours of basically showing what the investigation should have taken place, and then it culminates with trying to get that new DNA technology, the MVAC, basically, of the knots of those shoelaces. So that would be my recommendation. Coach's recommendation is the 3 Paradise Lost. I'd even go as far as to say that, during the summer, you could probably binge all of those, and just. I seriously don't recommend watching the 3 West of Memphis and the Forgotten West Memphis 3 all in a weekend, because your outlook on life will be shit. But with that said, Coach, you got anything else?
I don't.
Deuces.